This made me want to pull my hair out. Can Kamala Harris even answer a single straight question? Well, it seems like even her town hall moderators know she can't, because moderator Maria Shriver made a massive mistake spilling the beans on the entire scripted event when she outright refused to take spontaneous questions from the audience. Just take a look at this introduction and sense that uneasy tension in the room as Maria announces that there won't be questions in a town hall event that's supposed to be about voters asking questions.
And so I know all of you are looking forward to hearing from both of these extraordinary women. They're both incredible. And so I want to begin by getting going. We have some questions from the audience that we will get to. I have a few questions. As I said, I went around to meet several of you, and I heard some questions that some of you had. But universally, many of you said the reason I'm here is to see bipartisanship. I want to see what it looks like so I can go home with information. So you're going to get that, okay? So let's get going. So sit back, be comfortable. You're not, unfortunately. We have some predetermined questions, and hopefully I'll be able to ask some of the questions that might be in your head. I hope so.
Those last 10 seconds are where Maria made a massive mistake by letting out that secret of the Kamala campaign, and you can be sure that it's got a lot of people already talking. If you couldn't listen, the person from the audience interrupted her to ask whether there would be any spontaneous questions that the audience could ask, to which Maria apparently acted like she could just read their minds and hope she knows what they want to ask. But as afraid as the Kamala campaign may be of answering tough questions, we're not afraid to ask them. So subscribe to the Millionaire Mentor and hit that notification bell to never miss an update. Now, over the last few weeks that the Democratic Party has become even more desperate to shore up its polling numbers, we're seeing Kamala Harris make haphazard attempts at engaging with the media like this, and they're backfiring every time, including her interviews with 60 Minutes, Fox News, and even NBC. But what I find incredible is that apparently she can't even hold a casual town hall meeting with constituent voters, especially in such an important swing state like Michigan. For example, take a look at how this next question was asked, with someone pre-selected from the audience asked to get up and read a pre-written question to Kamala Harris on how the U.S. would end the war in Ukraine.
Martin Hauerlich, he's a former Republican member of the Michigan House of Representatives, and he's here with a question about national security.
Well, thank both of you for being here this afternoon. I really appreciate your coming to the state of Michigan to be here. I would like to ask, what can the U.S. do politically, economically, or militarily to deter Russia from continuing its war on the independent nation of Ukraine while simultaneously strengthening our own U.S. security interests?
Thank you, Martin.
Go ahead.
So I was actually in Munich at the Munich Security Conference delivering a speech when I first met with President Zelensky of Ukraine. And it was just days before Russia invaded. I've now met with President Zelensky, I think, 7 times, because the United States has rightly taken a position as a leader, a global leader on international rules and norms, that we must stand in support of one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of protecting sovereignty and territorial integrity, the importance of standing strong in opposition to the notion that in this case, Russia would attempt to change borders by force, to invade another nation, a sovereign nation, by force. And sadly, there is a huge difference between my opponent and me on this very fundamental issue. Back to the conversation about, there was a time when there was a phrase that I'll paraphrase, that basically politics ends at the sea line, at the boundaries of our country. That there are certain things, in particular matters of national security, where it's not about partisanship, it's about where should America stand.
I was almost expecting her to start that answer by telling us she grew up in a middle-class family, but you know what's more interesting? When questions from the audience aren't welcome, moderators usually have a list of them on a piece of paper to ask them directly, but by calling out people from the audience and having them read the entire thing themselves, perhaps the Kamala campaign wanted to give the impression that this really was a natural and spontaneous Q&A session. But even if you can forgive her for that, what kind of an answer was this to one of the most important questions that can be asked of a presidential candidate? Presumably, if these questions were pre-planned and Kamala Harris knew about them, couldn't she just have prepared an answer that was anything other than a confusing word salad like this? You can almost sense that no one in the audience was impressed either, but take a look at the rest of this answer to see how it strays further and further from what was actually asked.
For the 4 years that I was in the United States Senate, my favorite committee was the Senate Intelligence Committee. And I served on that committee, and we would meet in a room that's called a SCIF, and it's basically it's a very secure room. No press, with all due respect, is allowed in, no cameras. Everyone has to leave their cell phone outside. It's a bipartisan committee, and we would go in that room and receive classified information from America's intelligence community, sometimes our military leaders, about hotspots around the world and threats to our national security. And when we went in that room, and this is why it was my favorite committee, people would take off their suit jacket, roll up their sleeves, have a cup of coffee on the table. And we weren't Democrats or Republicans. We were Americans. And that is so important on a number of issues we are discussing this afternoon, but in particular on national security. My opponent, however, has made it a thing of his to admire dictators and autocrats around the world. He exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un, remember that? He has openly praised the president of Russia. Most recently, the report is, in the height of COVID. Remember, everyone was scrambling to get their hands on tests? Remember when Americans were dying by the hundreds every day, and Donald Trump secretly sent tests to the president of Russia for his personal use? He has said, Donald Trump, I will solve the matter of Ukraine and Russia in a day. Read through and understand what he is saying. He would surrender. He would have Ukraine surrender its fight against an aggressor, violating its sovereignty. If Donald Trump were president, Vladimir Putin will be sitting in Kyiv and understand what that would mean for America and our standing around the world.
Now imagine if Kamala Harris couldn't answer a question on the border crisis or foreign wars without making it about her opponent. What would she do with questions that should have nothing to do with Donald Trump to begin with? For example, what if someone asked her from the audience why she calls herself a Democrat and yet rose to the top of the party ticket in a non-democratic and unelected manner after a decision by her party establishment? And why did she keep continuing to cover for President Joe Biden despite the fact that we now know she understood his declining mental faculty long ago? But instead we have her filibuster for at least 5 minutes, which if you add up comes to several hours of people's collective time wasted hearing a non-answer. Well, we've seen her break down in response to questions like this in a more formal interview setting, but we may also have seen her general ability to deal with pushback even from her own voter base. Take a look at this moment from a campaign rally in Detroit back in August when Kamala Harris snapped at a group of people in her rally apparently chanting for Donald Trump.
So Project 2025, look, if he is elected, Donald Trump intends to give tax breaks to billionaires and big corporations. He intends to cut Social Security and Medicare. He intends to surrender our fight against the climate crisis, and he intends to end the Affordable Care Act. You know what? If you want Donald Trump to win, then say that, otherwise I'm speaking.
This seems to be a common theme with Kamala Harris that we even saw in her Fox News interview, pretending to be angry when she knows she has no answer. But as we've seen in those interviews as well as in town hall meetings like the one we saw with Anderson Cooper this week, she's going to have more opportunities to deflect with anger because a lot of these interviews interject and interrupt her when she flies off the handle in her response. But even if that didn't happen in this particular town hall in Michigan, it revealed something even more potentially damaging about how artificial and concocted the entire media campaign really is. But let me know in the comments what you think and share this video on your social media with people that need to see this before the election.